Good morning, everybody. I wanted to talk to you about chapter 2 in your novel. Most of you miss the symbolism behind the Valley of Ashes, and a good share of you got the idea of the um, bulletin board, billboard with Dr. Eckelberg. Um, but I wanted to read you a little bit of this so that we can clarify this a little bit. So on page 27, the beginning of chapter 2, it says that halfway between East Egg and West Egg, there is a valley, and this is desolate land, and it said it's a valley of ashes. And here's how it describes it: a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally, with a transcendent effort, of men who move dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. So what this is a like a landfill, and they would burn garbage and stuff. And so as the bulldozers would push the things that people have brought to dump, this is all their waste material and everything, the bulldozers would push it into big piles. And here's your metaphor. It's almost like a farm, because as they push this garbage more and more into big piles and things, it starts to look like buildings. And then they burn this stuff. And as they burn it, these buildings start to collapse and to crash down. And there's little men running all over, and they're loading up these ashes and the residue from this stuff. And so they're little gray men, is how they're described. They move dimly through the crumbling and powdery air. So this describes a landfill. And what this says to us is that, the things that go into a landfill are the things that we previously used. Maybe you buy a new couch and chair and you use it for 10, 15, 20 years, and it starts to get old, and so you take it to the landfill and you buy a new one. Maybe your washer or dryer doesn't work anymore. You'd take them to the landfill and you'd buy a new one. And so this landfill is filled with all of these things that used to be priceless material goods, really good things that the people cherished, and now they've fallen into bad shape, and they're just junked and they're sent away. And so the symbolism behind the Valley of Ashes is that it's showing how material things are accumulated and accumulated, and so much so that when they finally give out and they're taken to the dump, and they're just bulldozed into these great piles, and they almost look like cities of garbage and refuse. And so it's kind of showing that the people are scurrying around trying to get material goods, more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And what happens to them in the end? They don't last. They just fall into disrepair, and eventually they're burned up. And so that is the symbolism of the Valley of Ashes. And I don't think most of you understood that this was an actual landfill. And so the fact that it's halfway between West Egg and East Egg says a lot too. It kind of shows us that, maybe the people in the lower income are trying to get where the people in the higher income are, and really it's all for naught. It's doesn't matter. In the end, it's all burned up, falls into nothing. And so this kind of goes with the Bible, where it says we need to store up treasures in heaven and not treasures on earth, because they don't last and eventually they disintegrate. So this is a valley of ashes. Most of you got the billboard. Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, he is an optician and he sells eyeglasses. He does eye exams, sells eyeglasses. And so this is an old poster. Some of the books in the past used to have this as their cover. The early books of The Great Gatsby. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg were on the front cover. And so it's a billboard of a man with these enormously huge eyes, and he's looking out over the whole valley. And a lot of you got this symbolism that said, this is like God looking down on us. And it's interesting that this billboard is placed close to the gas station / home where Myrtle and Wilson live and her husband live, because this is where Tom meets Myrtle. He stops to get gas one day, evidently, and sees Myrtle, and they start a flirtation. And here's her poor, hardworking husband, good man, works hard, loves his wife, trying his best to provide everything to her. And God sees what has happened. You know, that flirtation that they carry on, and then between Tom and Myrtle, and then it turns into a full out affair. He has even rented a house or an apartment in New York City so that they can go there and be together. So there was something else I wanted to say. What was it? So that looking down over her house shows that, you know, we don't get away from anything. And this also serves to show how shallow Tom is and Myrtle is. And I wanted to point out something about Myrtle. She, because there's some questions about her in the chapter also. She liked her husband. She liked Wilson because he seemed to be stable. He owned this gas station, and she thought he could give her a lot of things because he seemed to be so stable, business owner, you know. And so she didn't really marry him because of love. She married him because she thought he had higher status than some of the other guys she'd been with. And so she marries him, and she starts to wonder if she did the right thing on their wedding day when she finds out that he had to borrow a suit for the wedding. He didn't even have a suit of his own. And at the very first day of their marriage was the day she became disgruntled. And then, of course, living above the station, you guys know what a little gas station is like. Smelly, probably. You can smell oil and stuff, dirty. Always cars coming in, clang, clang, clang. And so she began to see that, oh boy, I made a mistake. And the reason she made a mistake is because she thought it was going to be good for her. It would benefit her materially and financially. And she doesn't really think about the qualities that her husband has. She just thinks about what he can give her. And she's seeing that it's really not so great. And that's why she so easily flies into the arms of Tom when Tom comes around. Hey, here's somebody better. He drives a fancy car. I can do better. And so little does she know that Tom will never leave his wife. And why is that? Tom would never stoop to marry a common person like Myrtle. And she thinks he might. And of course, Tom will never do such a thing. So his wife Daisy is kind of a trophy, even though he doesn't really love her and he doesn't really care about her that much. So hopefully that will help to clear up chapter 2 for you a little bit. The rest of the questions you did pretty good on. You realized that from her speech, Myrtle was very uneducated, and that Tom, or not Tom, Nick is always like a spectator. And remember from the very beginning of the book, the first sentence, I think, in the book, let me look it up here. It says, in my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. In consequence, after thinking about that, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments. And so Nick does not make judgments about people. However, as a spectator at this debacle in the apartment, this party, do you think he liked it? No, of course not. And all of you said, no, he did not. He kind of just followed along, listened to what people said, did what everybody said, but he is the recorder, and he is the silent person who just records what happens, and he never does get into it. You know, Myrtle's sister was hitting on him big time, and he wasn't buying it. So that's why Nick is a reliable narrator, because he is the silent observer that lets us know what's happening. So good job on chapter 2. I hope you're enjoying reading chapter 3. I'll have some questions posted for you. Probably tonight I'll get those on, and those will be due Wednesday. So hope you have a happy day.